My special guest today is former Leicester City footballer and Irish international, Mr. Joe Waters. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy. I appreciate it.
How was it in Seattle there today?
Actually, it's got a bit breezy today. We had 70 odd, 80-degree weather yesterday, which is totally unusual for us. Last few days have been great, but it's about to change.
Okay. So, Joe, born and bred in Limerick in Ireland, you actually played Gaelic football and hurling before you started your football career. Is that right?
Yes, on the street. I mean, back in those days, kids were out in the street as soon as they could. And it was always whatever sport was on at that time of the year, Gaelic football, hurling, rugby, soccer, cricket even we played. So we tried everything.
When did you actually get into football? Or soccer for our American listeners.
Yeah, soccer, it kind of gets to you that way. I actually played my first game, competitive game. It was an indoor game in the rink in Limerick, the roller rink. They used to have an indoor tournament there way back in the days. And when I was 5, we played under 6 in a tournament in there. And the team I played for was the Rockets at the time. And the last team I played for were the Stars. So I went on a rocket to the Stars. It was a fair old journey.
Right. So you joined Leicester City as a teenager, right? As a pro? And
yes, 15.
Yeah, 15, okay. But you signed a pro contract in 1973?
Actually, I signed a pro contract in 1971. I actually signed when I was 17.
Okay.
But they didn't actually register me for the Football League till 73.
So you played both in midfield and defence, right?
Yes.
So Leicester City. Now, during these times at Leicester City, you must have played alongside the likes of Frank Worthington, Keith Weller. Yeah. Was Shilton in goal then too?
Shilton was in goal.
It was on the 70s, yeah.
In fact, one of the first games I actually saw Leicester play, it was probably maybe the third one, was the 1969 FA Cup final. The last time we were in the FA Cup final before we just made it recently.
Now, you scored a 2-goal debut in an FA Cup quarter-final against QPR in 1974 at Loftus Road. 2 cracking goals. I've seen them many times on YouTube.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it was a great way to start your career. You know, I came in that day for Alan Birchinall. And I actually, ironically, I was supposed to make my debut a few weeks before that against Spurs. But we just signed Steve Earle at the time, and the team was going through a little bit of an iffy patch. So Jimmy Bloomfield told me he had me ride back to Filbert Street with him from our training ground at Beaver Drive and said, "Hey, I was going to play you tomorrow, but I've decided not to throw you into this one, and but I will get you in before the end of the season." And of course, you're hugely disappointed because that's all you're there for. You want to be playing the first team.
Well, it must have been hard to break into that first team because Leicester in the 70s, you know, I remember being at the game myself watching Leicester against Liverpool. You know, had some top players there around that time.
Yes, we did. I mean, at that time, actually in 74, we had Peter Shilton, Frank Worthington, Keith Weller. All those guys from that team all went on to play for England.
Yeah, I mean, Worthington, he's just passed away recently. What a player. He nearly joined Liverpool. I think it was down to a medical or something. From what I read, it was down to a medical. I was only a kid at the time. But,
he had high blood pressure. And
that's what it was, okay.
And Bill Shankly told him, he said, "Look," he said, "I'm going to send you off to Mallorca for a week to let you settle and rest. And when you come back, we'll do the test on your blood pressure again." Well, of course, he sent Frank to Mallorca, and Frank had too good a time there. So when he came back, his blood pressure was even higher. So the whole deal fell through, and we bought him, I think, a week later. So that's how he ended up being with us at Leicester.
Who was your favourite players growing up?
My favourite players growing up were George Best. I idolized George Best as a player. Bobby Charlton, I was a huge United fan, and I really only became a United fan because they had so many Irish players playing for them at the time.
Yeah.
And Noel Cantwell, who was from Cork, was the captain of Manchester United at the time. So they became the team that I followed because of that.
Joe, the game is so different now to your era back in the 70s. Tackles back then, for instance, you look at Tommy Smith, Norman Hunter, Ron Harris, and in later years, Graham Souness. I was going to ask you, who's the toughest players you've played against?
Wow, you mentioned some of them. Chopper Harris, Tommy Smith, Norman Hunter, Johnny Giles, Billy Bremner.
There was full front. There was actually fights on the pitch in them days. You look at footage of Bremner fighting. I forget which game it is that you seen throwing punches.
Well, Bremner got lifted off the ground by Dave Mackay when Leeds played Spurs. Bremner kind of went over the top on him, and Dave took exception to it and grabbed him by the front of his jersey and lifted him up and had his fist in his face. But it was tough stuff. The cup final, the replay at Old Trafford between Leeds and Chelsea. That was an absolute bloodbath. Those guys just killed each other in that game, and there was no prisoners taken, and no. I can't recall anybody getting booked in that game.
Unbelievable. Imagine that now.
Now it's, I watched the game the other day, the Spurs United game when Son got tapped in the face. If you went down for something like that in our day, you'd be laughed out of the dressing room.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Also, you played at international level, right, for Ireland?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you the famous story you once told me about the famous with just Luke Kelly. We're talking about Luke Kelly and all the Wolf Tones, the Irish bands. They used to follow you. They used to come.
Yes, they did. We went to. We were on at the end of the season. A lot of internationals were played just as the season finished. So they would play international matches, European qualifiers or World Cup qualifiers. And we were going to Switzerland, and we went to Russia. We went to Kiev to play Russia down there. And then we went to Switzerland, and Luke was with us. We landed at the airport, and Luke was there coming to the game. And Johnny Giles invited him onto the team bus. So as we're going to the hotel, we're having a sing-song. The Irish team was always good for a sing-song. And then while we were walking, when we were in Switzerland, I went for a walk with Don Gibbons and Steve Highway and a couple of the other guys. And we're walking by... we're walking down the street, and across the street were all these Irish supporters in a pub across the road. And Tommy, who's the lead singer with the Wolf Tones, called us over and wanted us to go in for a beer, but we couldn't go in. We had a game the next day, but we stayed and chatted with the fans for a while.
Right.
Paddy Riley used to come to the Green Isle Hotel when we were there for games. There were lots of celebrities that showed up at the hotel when we were there.
That must have been great. You're talking Irish legendary singers there. These are the old school. Oh, yeah. Them guys will last forever. Them songs. I still sing them songs myself. You've been down, you've seen me, and them songs are timeless too.
Yes, they are. And Luke was one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. He was just a fantastic guy, as was Tommy and Paddy Riley. I had dinner with Paddy Riley with Ray Tracy one night at the Green Isle. And just a funny bloke to be around, a fun bloke to be with. Just great times.
Well, I'm a big fan of Ronnie Drew as well, before we get back to football. Did you ever meet Ronnie Drew?
I never met Ronnie Drew, but ironically, my father did. My father used to work on the railway.
Right.
And the Dubliners were playing in Limerick. And they came down on the train from Dublin down to Limerick. And of course, they had their gear with them and they needed a hand. And my dad was a porter on the radio or on the station at the time. So he helped them with their equipment, getting it out to the taxis so they could get their gear and get out. And I met him. Actually, that's not quite true because I did meet him one time. We went out to Scariff. The Dubliners were playing out there. And I went out to see Luke. And as we were there, Luke introduced me to Ronnie and some the other boys. Yeah. So it was, I did meet them actually. So okay. I'd forgotten about that. That was in the recess of my mind somewhere.
So Joe, 1976, you went on loan to Grimsby Town.
Yes.
You ended up signing for Grimsby Town not long after,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Talk us through that one. You moved from Leicester to Grimsby.
Well, I was, I was at Leicester. I was in the first team squad. Then I would, I would be sub for a lot. But it came to a stage where, and if someone was injured, I would play. But I wanted to play more. I wanted to be on the field more.
Right.
And I went to see Jimmy Bloomfield about it, and he didn't want to let me go because he said, I was still a part of his plans. But we had played the night before at Manchester City, and Tony Buck was the manager at Manchester City that night, and we lost 1-0, which back in those days, it was like the 96th minute, which was unheard of for a game to go on that long back in those days, and I wasn't sub, I was starting man. So I went in to see Jimmy the next day, and he said, well, no, I want to keep you. And I said, but Jim, I said, we're at City last night. You had 4 guys injured, and I couldn't even make the subs bench. And he said, He said, I see what you're saying. He said, well, I'll put you on the transfer list, but I'm not going to tell anybody. And well, that's not much good to me, is it? But
you just wanted to play first team football, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to play first team football. Yeah. So he said, I have lots of clubs calling up about you and wanting to take you on loan. He said, but I'm not going to have you going out to all these clubs on loan and them not buying you. So the only way I'm going to let you go on loan is if that team is going to make an offer up front for you. So I said, okay, that sounds fair. So we were playing a reserve game at Norwich, and I was the captain of the reserve team actually at the time. So, but we were there, and Peter Shilton was in the team because he was in Jim's bad books. Keith Weller was in the team because Keith wanted away. Derby had tried to sign him, and Jim wouldn't let him go. So Keith was upset about that. Lenny Glover was playing. Graham Cross was playing. All guys that had played in the first team for years. Some of them had played in the 1969 Cup final, and we're in the dressing room, and our coach Dave Coates used to always go to the office and find out what scouts were at the game to let the guys know, Jim up. And he came back, and he's reading off the list of clubs that are there, and it's list of clubs, big list of clubs. And he said, and Grimsby are here. And Lenny Glover says, hey, Joe, you definitely recognize that fella. He'd be the guy in the yellow sou'wester up in the stands. So it was just one of those. We were all looking for places to go at the time to get away. And that's how it happened. So a week or so later, I went to Grimsby, made my debut at Millwall, and I scored in that one. And I stayed for the month. And then the Grimsby said they couldn't afford me. So I was going back to Leicester, and there was apparently a huge fan uproar about it because the fans had liked me playing there and appreciated it. And so the club kind of had to backtrack, and the fans actually raised part of the fee to buy me. Which was the first time that had happened in England at the time. So it was pretty cool. And from then it was just... so
the fans chipped in. They wanted you that much. The fans chipped in as well as the club. Wow.
Yeah.
So you played until 1984 for Grimsby. I think it was a cup tie you once told me about, and I'd like you to tell the listeners this one because this was a funny story. And I'm sure I was at this game as a young kid, if I'm not mistaken. At Anfield, played against Liverpool. The cops started chanting different names for the Liverpool team.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, we beat Sheffield United in the second round of the FA Cup, so that brought us into the third round when all the big boys would come in.
yeah.
We were top of the third division at the time, and the we draw Liverpool, right? So that's great, fantastic. We get there. We took 20,000 people to Anfield with us.
Wow.
From Grimsby, and one of the signs on the buses as they're leaving, with the last person leaving Grimsby, turn the lights out. So we get to Anfield, and there was no room. There was no tickets. There was no room in the stands for the Grimsby fans because people couldn't. They hadn't expected that many to come, so they're eventually putting them into the Cop. Well, which is a bad move in those days because people now think that they're coming in and trying to take over the Cop and take over their territory. So that didn't go down well for some. But then in the finish, we actually had two real good chances early on, and we missed both of them. And then Liverpool got into gear and they started going through the gears. And pretty soon we're 3-4-0 down. And that's when the Cop started chanting Phil Eel and Kenny Dogfish and Terry Mackerel and things like that. Yeah. They were going, and I mean, it was great fun at the time, laughing at it, but it was a great experience for us.
The top Liverpool teams, what a team that was in the 70s.
Oh yeah, I mean they won the first division that year, and they were European champions as well. So you're going there. And I met Steve Highway actually. I went to see him in the Players' Lounge, and he was playing snooker, and he was the 13th man, and he said to me, "Whatever you do, do not draw this game." He said, "You either win or you lose today, because I'm not coming to Grimsby on Tuesday night." So it's a sense of humor about it, but it was a great experience. It's a great day out. People still talk about it to this day, and it was a great experience for us because we learned so much from it, and we actually went on to win the third division championship that year. And both Bob Paisley and Bill Shankly, Bill Shankly was at the game. Bob Paisley was the manager, and Bob did a big piece in the local Grimsby paper saying what a good team we were, and that he was fully confident that we would be promoted at the end of the year. And Bill Shankly said the same thing to our manager, George Carr. And George was devastated after the game because he had hoped that we were going to give a better account of ourselves. But Bill Shankly said to him, he said, "Look, George," he says, "your team is a team. They played, they never gave up. We come out and we played. We didn't try to defend, get 11 people behind the ball. We just came out and played the way that we played, which was attacking football." Yeah. And the irony of it was that a friend of mine who came to play with us in America played for Stoke City at the time, and they played him the next week. And they had 11 people behind the ball and wouldn't come out of their own half. And the cops started chanting, "Bring back Grimsby." So it's kind of a neat story from it all.
So in 1984, you moved to the United States to continue your career. Tell us about your journey.
I came over to Tacoma. We're just in the Great Northwest. We're on the Puget Sound. We're actually, as I'm looking out my window now, I can see the skyscrapers up in Seattle from my house. And beautiful area, indoor soccer. And the year I came, the NASL had just folded. So all the top players playing in the NASL were all going indoor and playing indoor. So some absolutely, top players. We had you're playing against the likes of Giorgio Chinaglia, Kazdena, who played for Poland in the 70 World Cup in the semi-final, Johan Neeskens from Holland, 1970 World Cup final. Gordon Hill won the FA Cup with United, and just a ton of other guys, Brazilians, Argentinians.
Yeah.
I mean, the Peter Ward, that played for England, played for Nottingham Forest, was here. Gary Gillespie was, I think, a Liverpool guy for a little while, went to Coventry.
Gary, yeah, I was asking met up with Gary when I went home just over a year ago. We went out after the Wolves game, yeah, because he was here in San Antonio at one of the Legends nights. Yeah.
And Steve Daly, who went for £1 million to Man City from.
I remember Steve Daly,
yeah. From Wolves. He was over here at San Diego. So a lot of the guys that you played against and knew from back home were over there. And
you played in Canada too.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I played two summers up in Canada, in Calgary, and really enjoyed that. Getting back to playing outdoor, as opposed to playing indoor.
Okay.
And again played to get with and against a lot of top class. A lot of the guys that went to the World Cup in Mexico, when Canada qualified for it, when they played against France and I think Peru, maybe were in their group. But a lot of those guys were played against a lot of those guys, and a lot of those guys were actually making their living playing indoor at the time and would play outdoor up in Canada in the summer.
Well, did you come back to Seattle after Canada? You came back to Seattle?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I came back and actually I became a player coach with the Tacoma Stars. Alvin Hinton was our head coach. Steve Buttle, who had played for Ipswich Town when Sir Bobby Robson was the manager there, was our assistant coach, and I was player coach. So
that was another great side in your era, Ipswich.
Oh,
Paul Cooper, Eric Gates, Paul Mariner, George Burley, Mick Mills.
Mick Mills, and then of course you had Arnold Muren and Franz Tyson.
Yeah.
A couple of the Dutch guys, the first foreign players to probably come over, and fantastic players.
Yeah, they
were too. So it was.
They beat Arsenal in the '78 Cup final. Was it the '78 Cup final? Yeah. Osborne scored.
Roger Osborne scored a goal. Yeah, he did.
When did you decide to call it a day as a player?
I retired when I was 38. What was happening? That we were playing sometimes 3 games a week. We'd play Wednesday, we'd play Friday, Saturday, or we play Wednesday and we play Saturday, Sunday. And it was just getting too much for me. The travel. I mean, we played in San Diego one night, and we were going from San Diego to Kansas City to play a rearranged game, and then we were going from Kansas City to Chicago the next day, and we were going to play in Kansas City at 7:00 on Friday night, and we were going to play Chicago at 1:00 the next day.
Wow.
So it was brutal. And one of my teammates, Mike Dowler, our goalkeeper, who played for Newport County back in the day, did a little measuring on the map, and he said, "This is like us playing in Manchester tonight, and then going and playing in Moscow tomorrow night."
Right.
Yeah, that was the kind of travel that we were doing. So it was getting to be hard, from that standpoint, and the game was so fast, and so high energy that it was getting to the point where you could have you could have enough energy for 1.5 games, but it was getting too much for me, and the squads were getting smaller and smaller, right. Because the salary caps were coming in, and they wanted experienced players as much as possible. But that was the time I decided that I was going to let it go and just continue coaching.
Yeah. So you got into coaching after that. Did you have to take your badges and all that stuff before you
Yes,
while you're playing.
as soon as I finished, it's a little bit like the European system that's now, that if you've been a professional player, then you can automatically go to the B license,
Okay.
and then you have to pass the B license, and then you have to take the A license, which is what I did.
Let's talk briefly about the big news in the game last week, the European Super League. What do you make about that?
I thought it was terrible. I mean, I thought it was terrible when the Big Six tried to hijack the Premier League and get more money out of them, and try and get rid of teams, and they couldn't do that. And then they come out with this thing, I mean, I just, you listen to the managers, you listen to Jurgen Klopp speak, and you listen to Pep speak, and they were all talking there's too many games. And now they were going to lump this European Super League in on top, instead of the Champions League. I mean, they were going to be playing another 20-odd, 30 games in a crowded season already.
Yeah.
And it's just, and the hardest part to take is that it was a closed shop. They would promote and relegate some teams, but the difficulty with all of that was how are you going to do that? If it's a Premier League, if it's a former Premier League team or a Premier League team that's getting relegated from the Super League back to the Premier League, how does the Premier League deal with that?
It was just, I'm just so glad it's all. I mean, this is this is a working class sport, and it's all about the fans at the beginning, because I remember going back to when I was 7, 8 years old. We didn't have money. My dad would bring me to every single game. Yeah. God bless him. He'd bring me there at noon, January, February, freezing cold, so I could get my spec on the railings in the front, in the paddock. I'd be there 3 hours with a bag of chips, waiting for the team to come out, all excited. And my dad would do that just for me, and I'll never forget that, And, we still talk about it now, because me and my dad
the
talk
same
about it
thing
now.
with me. I mean, from the time I was a young flip, the time I was 4 or 5, and my dad was a player. He was an amateur player, but he was pretty useful. Yeah. But finished his career very early because of a knee injury. But he would take us to support our club, Pike Rovers. We would follow him everywhere in the FAI Junior Cup, which is the biggest amateur tournament. It's the biggest cup tournament in Europe, actually, because the rounds start with the very, very smallest of amateur clubs, and they're all amateur clubs, but there's hundreds of them, and they have to go through all the rounds. And we used to go up to Dublin and Cork and Galway, wherever they were playing, we would go. And on the way back, you'd be in the old milk carriage, the trains when they bring the milk from one place to the other, and there'd be a sing-song going on in the back of it. And then on Sundays, I would go up to the Markets Field, which was right at the top of the housing estate that I lived in, and to watch Limerick and all my heroes up there, Al Finucane, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Andy McAvoy, Joe Casey, all those guys Joe Manny, all the guys that inspired me to become a soccer player. And you'd be waiting and you'd say, "Hey, mister, can you lift me over the turnstile?" Yeah. And the fella would pay for himself and he'd lift you over the turnstile, and you were in.
Done all that.
Again, watching.
I mean, getting back to this Super League thing, the famous Shankly quote: "At a football club, there's a holy trinity: the players, the manager, and the supporters. Directors don't come into it; they're only there to sign the checks." So these owners and all these money people trying to form this league, they don't understand. They really don't. The fans and the passion, and especially they're all from working class areas. All the teams back home,
Absolutely.
And it's like let's say they go. Is the chosen six, shall we say? Let's just say, for example, Leicester City finished third, but have no place in the Super League. But ninth place Arsenal automatically qualify because they're one of the six. You know what I'm saying? Right. And it takes away all the history as well of winning the Champions League. Liverpool, I remember 77, 78, 81, 84, 2005, and we won it again in 18, 19, yeah. So, yeah, it's, I just want to, Leeds did it all the other day against us when they come out with the shirts. Earn it. they put on the shirts and the warm up shirts. So anyway, I just wanted to talk that with you. Anyway, I'm glad it's been put to bed, and I hope it doesn't raise its head again. You know,
I absolutely hope it doesn't.
Yeah,
You know, because I used to love the format actually of the All European Cup.
Yeah.
Where it was only the best teams that made it.
Yeah.
You know, but everything has to change, and you have to move the times.
Yeah.
But you know, like you were saying there, I mean, I saw a quote from a former Wolves manager that's now Norway manager, and he's saying Arsenal and Spurs aren't even in the top 30 best teams in Europe.
I know. Next thing they're in the
they're into it.
Yeah, they're in the six.
It just makes you laugh. What their standard is for the top teams.
I know.
You know, and it's like Juventus. Juventus are not even going to make the Champions League this year. That's why he was pushing it so hard.
Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us. I hope to see you soon back in San Antonio.
Oh, yes. And thanks for having me.
It's been great.
It's always good fun talking to you, and it's always good fun reminiscing about the fun times, the good times.
Great days. Yeah. I appreciate you, Joe. Listeners, Mr. Joe Waters. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks,
you. Thanks, buddy.